We are unpacking something really fascinating today.
Yeah, we're looking at this massive economic paradox, right?
Exactly. We are pulling from a text called The Migrant Advantage: Why New Arrivals Thrive in Business. And the mission for this deep dive, what we really want to figure out today, is why people who arrive in a new country with, virtually nothing, why they consistently outperform the native-born population when it comes to founding successful businesses.
Right. It's wild. Across Australia, North America, Europe, the UK, it's everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. And we want to decode the mechanics of how they do it. And more importantly, how you, listening right now, can actually adopt this mindset.
Because it's not magic, as we'll see.
No, not at all.
Right.
But to really grasp how crazy this paradox is, I want you to imagine a scenario. Let's make it visceral for a second.
Okay, yeah.
So you step out of the sliding glass doors of an international airport terminal, and the climate is just like entirely unfamiliar.
Right. The air is different.
Exactly. The air smells different. It's this mix of diesel and, I don't know, local food you can't quite identify. And the signs above the street are in a language, or maybe a dialect, that you have to actively translate in your head before you can even figure out where the taxis are.
Which is exhausting on its own.
Oh, totally. And you're just standing there with two suitcases. That canvas and plastic, that contains the sum total of your immediate material life.
It's just a profound stripping away of context. I mean, everything you used to rely on subconsciously, it's just gone.
Gone. Totally gone. And let's catalog what you don't have in this moment. You have no family network within 1,000 miles to, crash with.
Or borrow a car from.
Right. You have no childhood friends to call up for a favor.
Yeah.
You have absolutely zero established professional reputation.
You're a ghost.
Literally a ghost. If you walk into a bank in this new city, you are effectively a financial ghost. There's no credit score, no 10-year history of responsible mortgage payments.
Yeah.
The algorithms that dictate modern commerce do not know you exist. And you don't have that deep, intuitive understanding of the local market. You don't know what people there buy, what they think is expensive, what they do on a Tuesday night.
And when you speak, you have an accent.
Yes, which instantly and permanently marks you as an outsider to whoever is listening.
Yeah.
So you are staring down this invisible but incredibly thick wall of cultural barriers. And, as a matter of objective reality, you are likely going to face systemic headwinds and outright discrimination.
Right. And if you take that profile and you present it to a panel of venture capitalists,
Oh, they'd laugh you out of the room.
they really would. Or a room full of MBA professors, right? The universal consensus would be that this individual is statistically doomed in the business world.
Completely doomed.
Because every conventional metric of business viability relies on the exact assets this person lacks: local networks, cheap capital, market familiarity, institutional trust. Starting a business under those conditions shouldn't just be hard. From a purely mechanical standpoint, it should be near impossible.
And yet it happens. Not just occasionally, but systematically.
Yeah.
When we look at the data from the source text, and again, this pulls from comprehensive studies across the globe, we see this glaring contradiction to traditional business logic.
Right. They aren't just scraping by.
No. Migrant entrepreneurs are starting businesses at incredibly high rates, and they're disproportionately overrepresented among successful founders. They're building massive companies, scaling them, creating immense economic value.
And it's a reality that, honestly, traditional economics struggled with for decades. The math just didn't work.
Right.
But as our source details, the answer has absolutely nothing to do with luck. It's not a statistical anomaly. We're looking at this highly systematic combination of psychological selection, sheer necessity, unique network structures, and, well, a fundamentally different way of processing information.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start by dismantling the biggest myth that surrounds this whole topic. Because when society sees a demographic overperforming, the easiest, the laziest explanation is to assume there's something inherently magical about them.
Oh, the magical migrant trope.
Exactly. There's this prevailing narrative that the successful migrant entrepreneur has some innate, specialized gene for business, or that they're just naturally smarter than the local population.
Which is, it's a very comforting narrative for the native-born population.
How so?
Well, because it acts as an excuse. If we tell ourselves that these new arrivals are just magically gifted, we don't have to look closely at our own complacency. And we don't have to analyze the actual mechanics of their success.
That makes a lot of sense.
But the research points to a much more rigorous, logical explanation. What's fascinating here is this concept of the selection effect.
The selection effect.
Yeah, okay.
I want to spend some real time on this because understanding this completely changes how you view the demographic.
Yeah.
We aren't just looking at a random sampling of people, are we?
Not at all. Migration is not something that happens to you passively. It is an action you must aggressively execute. And the sheer friction of executing a massive geographical, cultural, and financial relocation, it acts as a brutal psychological filter. Just think about the timeline and the toll of this process. It usually begins years before anyone gets on a plane. The individual has to conceive the idea, to leave everything they know.
Which is huge.
It is. And then they have to save an exorbitant amount of money relative to their local economy. They have to navigate these Kafkaesque bureaucratic immigration systems, face the very real possibility of rejection.
And make the agonizing decision to leave aging parents or lifelong friends behind.
Exactly.
When you lay it out like that, it's basically the ultimate entrepreneurial boot camp.
It really is.
Like, the filter only lets a very specific psychological profile through the gate. If you have the risk profile to pack up your entire life and move across the globe, starting an LLC is comparatively easy.
Precisely. If you are deeply risk-averse, you don't get on the plane. If you fall apart at the first sign of bureaucratic ambiguity, you don't survive the visa process. If you lack profound, deeply rooted ambition, you don't abandon the comfort of your current life to start from zero. The demographic of people who actually complete the process of migration is heavily pre-screened for the exact traits that make a successful founder.
You know, I was looking at the trait matrix that major venture capital firms use to evaluate startup founders. They use these massive psychological rubrics, right?
Yeah, these whole systems for it.
And they want a founder who has a high tolerance for ambiguity, someone who doesn't freeze when the rules aren't clear. They want someone with incredible resilience who can hear no 50 times and still pitch on the 51st.
Right.
They want extreme adaptability, the ability to pivot their entire business model when the market shifts.
Yeah.
If you map those VC requirements against the psychological requirements of moving to a foreign country with 2 suitcases, it is a perfect one-to-one overlap.
Yeah. It really is. I mean, a tech founder pivoting their software product because of poor user feedback requires adaptability, sure. But a new arrival pivoting their entire understanding of how society functions, how taxes are paid, how social hierarchies operate, and doing it in a second language. That requires a magnitude of adaptability that makes standard business pivoting look like child's play. By the time they arrive, they have already demonstrated a capacity for calculated risk that most people will never exercise in their entire lives.
Okay, but passing that psychological filter is only the prerequisite. Because once they arrive, they hit the reality of the local economy. And this brings us to a dynamic that I think shatters our romanticized view of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, the necessity angle.
Right. We love the narrative of the visionary founder. We picture someone sitting in a trendy coffee shop, looking out the window, and just being struck by a brilliant, world-changing idea. They choose to start a business because they are inspired. But our source makes it very clear that for a massive portion of new arrivals, the driver isn't inspiration.
It's desperation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We idolize entrepreneurs as these visionary opportunity seekers. But isn't this saying that a lot of them are just backed into a corner?
Yes. It is the raw push of necessity. The data from the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, is unequivocal on this point. While some migrants certainly arrive with a business plan ready to go, a huge percentage are effectively forced into the entrepreneurial arena because the traditional labor market is structurally closed to them.
Let's mechanically break down why that labor market is closed.
Oh.
Because, you might think, well, if they have all these great traits, resilience, ambition, why wouldn't a local corporation just snap them up?
Because local corporate hiring is built on pattern matching. And the new arrival does not fit the pattern. Let's say you were a senior civil engineer in your home country. You oversaw massive infrastructure projects. You arrive in a new city and apply for an engineering role.
Okay.
The human resources algorithm scans your resume. It doesn't recognize your university. It doesn't recognize the companies you worked for. You have no local references to vouch for your competence.
Wow, so the algorithm just tosses it.
Often, yes. And furthermore, the local licensing board might explicitly state that your foreign degree is invalid here, requiring you to go back to school for 4 years just to get a piece of paper proving you know what you already know.
So the system completely discounts your past. You are a senior engineer being treated like an unskilled teenager.
It is a massive erasure of professional identity. And even if they try to apply for lower-level entry jobs, they face barriers. They might be deemed overqualified on paper,
Right.
or the hiring manager might hold unconscious biases, assuming that someone with a heavy accent will struggle to communicate with the team, or simply feeling uncomfortable managing someone from a different cultural background. The doors to traditional, safe, salaried employment are systematically locked.
So you're sitting in a new country, your savings are draining every single day, you can't get a job that matches your skills, and you can't even get a job serving coffee. You are backed into a corner.
Yeah.
You have to survive. But how does that translate into economic success? Because usually, desperation leads to exploitation, not innovation.
It leads to entrepreneurship when combined with that pre-screened psychological profile we discussed earlier. They cannot find a job, so they must create one. And the psychological shift here is critical.
Tell me more about that shift.
Well, when a native-born citizen starts a business, they usually have a safety net. If their boutique agency fails, they can fall back on their local network, move in with family, and get a regular job.
Sure.
For the migrant who has been locked out of the labor market, failure is not an option. Returning home might mean returning to a collapsed economy or a war zone. This sheer necessity strips away all the vanity from entrepreneurship.
I see what you mean. They aren't spending 6 months designing the perfect logo or debating their brand ethos. They are figuring out how to generate cash flow by Friday.
Exactly. Necessity forces a ruthless pragmatism. It accelerates the timeline from ideation to execution because they are literally working to keep a roof over their heads. Survival frequently morphs into success because the foundational habits built during that desperate survival phase, intense resourcefulness, hyper-focus on revenue, willingness to do the unglamorous work, are the exact habits required to scale a massive company later on.
Okay, so necessity might force them into the arena, but it doesn't dictate what they actually build. I mean, if you're desperate, you could just start a standard cleaning company or a landscaping business.
And many do.
And many do. But our source is tracking people who build highly innovative, scalable businesses. To do that, you need an edge. And this is where we get into my absolute favorite concept in the entire text.
The information advantage.
Yes, the dual lens superpower.
This is the cognitive engine of their success.
Let me try to build out a metaphor for this, because the mechanics of how this works in the brain are fascinating. So imagine the local economy of your city is a vibrant, chaotic 3D movie playing on a giant screen. Okay, I'm with you.
Now, the native-born population people who have lived there their whole lives are watching this movie, but they are only wearing glasses with blue lenses.
Right.
Everything they see is filtered through local customs, local supply chains, local pricing models, local consumer habits. They see a completely coherent, functional world, but it's entirely blue.
Because that's all they know.
Exactly. Now, a migrant arrives in the city. They look at the exact same economy, the exact same streets, the exact same businesses, but they're wearing the classic red and blue 3D glasses.
Ah, I love this.
Their right eye is looking through the blue lens of their new home, observing what the locals do. But their left eye is looking through the red lens of their origin country. They possess this massive preloaded database of different technologies, different business models, and different ways of solving human problems.
And what happens when you look at a 3D image with both lenses? The picture pops. It suddenly gains depth. They aren't just seeing two different things. Their brain is actively calculating the cognitive arbitrage between the red lens and the blue lens. They are seeing a three-dimensional market opportunity that is physically impossible for the local blue lens population to perceive, no matter how smart they are.
That is a brilliant way to illustrate the economic concept of information asymmetry.
Right.
In a standard economic model, information asymmetry is when one party knows more about a transaction than another, like an insider trader knowing a stock is going to crash. But in this context, the migrant entrepreneur possesses actionable, systemic market intelligence that the local ecosystem is entirely blind to. They have a completely different baseline for what constitutes normal.
Let's break down how that actually looks in the street level.
Yeah.
Like, how does a red and blue lens brain process a walk down a regular city block?
Well, they notice the absences. A local walks down the street and thinks this street has a pharmacy, a grocery store, and a bank. It is complete.
Right, it looks fine.
The migrant walks down the exact same street and thinks, where is the mobile payment kiosk?
Oh.
Because where they come from, there is a kiosk on every corner that allows you to transfer money globally in seconds without a bank account. And they wonder, why are people here still waiting in line at the bank to fill out paper forms? They see an inefficiency that the locals have just accepted as a fact of nature.
They realize that a localized problem has already been solved somewhere else. The text cites Australian research highlighting how migrant entrepreneurs excel at opportunity recognition because they live in the friction between these two realities.
And often the genesis of their most successful businesses comes from trying to solve a personal frustration that arises from this friction.
Right. Let's build out a hypothetical narrative to see this in motion. Imagine you move from a country that has a profound centuries-old culture of specialized coffee brewing. It's an art form.
Beautiful.
You arrive in a new, fast-paced Western city, and the coffee culture is, frankly, depressing.
It's just fuel.
Exactly. It's all about speed.
Mm-hmm.
It's hyper-commercialized, burned beans served in massive paper cups. The local population loves it because they don't know any better. They've only ever looked through the blue lens.
Right.
But you are looking through the red lens. You are personally frustrated because you just want a proper cup of coffee with the specific brewing equipment and the specific roast profile you had back home.
So you face a choice. You can assimilate and drink the bad coffee, or you can leverage your information advantage. You know the exact specifications of the specialized brewing machines. You know what a fair price for those machines is in your home country.
Yeah.
You understand the aesthetic and the pacing of how that coffee should be served. The local entrepreneurs couldn't possibly open this business because they don't possess the data. You do.
So you act on it.
Mm-hmm.
You import the beans. You import the machines, you sign a lease on a tiny storefront, you open your shop, and you don't compromise the aesthetic.
Yeah.
You serve it exactly the way it's served in your origin country.
Yeah.
And what happens?
People notice.
The local population walks by, they try it, and their minds are blown.
Mm.
You've introduced a radically superior product. You suddenly have a line around the block, not because you invented something out of thin air, but because you transferred an existing solution across a geographic boundary.
And we see this exact same dynamic playing out in massive, highly complex industries as well.
Like what?
Think about the diaspora communities. When a huge wave of people migrates from one country to another, they form a massive consumer base in the new city. A native-born banker looks at that community and sees a low-income demographic that doesn't fit standard loan profiles.
The blue lens.
Right. The migrant entrepreneur looks at their own community and sees a massive unmet demand for culturally specific financial services, like specialized remittance structures or community-based lending models. They understand the nuances of trust and credit within that specific culture, allowing them to build highly lucrative fintech platforms that traditional banks completely ignored.
The opportunity was sitting right there in the open. It wasn't hidden, it was just invisible to the blue lenses.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? It really forces a moment of reflection for you, the listener. Think about your own industry, your own office, your own daily routines.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you walk straight past a glaring market inefficiency simply because you are too accustomed to the local status quo?
All the time, probably.
You are so used to the way things have always been done that you don't even realize the friction exists. You accept terrible software or broken supply chain or poor customer service as just the way it is. The migrant advantage is the fundamental refusal to accept the local reality as the only reality.
It is a phenomenal cognitive tool, but we have to be realistic here. Seeing the gap in the market is only the first step.
Yeah.
Spotting the missing coffee machine or identifying the unbanked diaspora doesn't automatically spawn a successful company.
Yeah.
You have to actually execute. You need to source the materials, you need to find manufacturing, you need to establish distribution. And if you are locked out of the traditional local systems, how do you do that?
Which brings us to the physical infrastructure behind the ideas. Having the network and the idea is great, but getting the resources to fill it requires connections. The source text calls this the power of dual networks. And it argues that this might actually be the single most underrated structural advantage in modern business.
I agree with that assessment completely. Fundamentally, business does not run on spreadsheets. It runs on networks, it runs on human trust, it runs on who you know, who owes you a favor, and who believes you will pay your invoices on time.
Okay, I want to challenge this point a bit because on the surface, it feels completely counterintuitive.
Let's hear it.
Let's pit two founders against each other. Founder A is native-born. Their family has lived in the city for 3 generations. They went to the local high school. Their college roommate is now a commercial real estate broker. They play golf at the local country club, and their uncle is a vice president at a regional bank. Founder B is our new arrival. They got off the plane 6 months ago. They know a few people from their community center. Wait, wouldn't a local business owner with 30 years of deep generational ties in one city have a much stronger network than someone who just arrived?
It's an excellent pushback. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the distinction we need to make here is the difference between network depth and network leverage.
Depth versus leverage. Okay.
You are entirely correct that Founder A has incredible network depth. If they need a local zoning permit pushed through City Hall or a flexible line of credit from that regional bank, they will get it 10 times faster than Founder B. For a purely domestic business, say, opening a local car wash, Founder A wins every time.
Makes sense.
But our source is looking at founders who build scalable, high-growth, often international businesses. And in that arena, Founder B has something Founder A does not. They have 2 completely separate networks. They're building a local network out of necessity in their adopted country, but they also maintain a deep pre-existing network in their country of origin.
So the power isn't in comparing the local networks to each other. The power is the bridge between the two.
Exactly. The source points to extensive research across dozens of developed countries, and the data is consistent. Immigrant entrepreneurs possess significantly stronger international business networks.
Wow.
Think about the mechanical leverage of that. In a globalized economy, what does an international network give you? It gives you immediate, trusted access to overseas suppliers. It gives you a direct line to cheaper, highly specialized manufacturing. It gives you an entire pipeline of international talent that local recruiters don't even know how to tap into.
Let's walk through a concrete, step-by-step example of how this dual network actively defeats the deep local network. Let's say both Founder A and Founder B decide to start a direct-to-consumer athletic wear brand in the exact same city.
A hoodie company.
Yeah, a hoodie company. Founder A uses their deep local network. They call their buddy to design the logo. They use local fabric suppliers, and they hire a local manufacturing facility. Because local labor and real estate are expensive, their cost to produce one hoodie is $40. They sell it for $80. It's a solid, functional domestic supply chain.
Now look at Founder B. They don't have the deep local network, so they can't get the cheap local warehouse space. But when it comes to the core of the business manufacturing, they don't even bother looking locally.
They look through the red lens.
Exactly. They pull out their phone and send a voice memo on WhatsApp to a former colleague or a family member back in their home country who runs a highly advanced textile mill. They negotiate the deal in their native language, bypassing all cultural misunderstandings. Because they have established deeply rooted trust with this overseas manufacturer, they get favorable payment terms right out of the gate.
The manufacturer agrees to produce the hoodies with zero money down because they know Founder B's family back home.
Exactly. The trust bridges the ocean. And because of the economic differences between the two countries, Founder B's cost to produce the exact same quality hoodie is $12.
Wow. So Founder A is making a $40 profit per unit, and Founder B is making a $68 profit per unit. Founder B can now afford to undercut Founder A on retail price, outspend them massively on digital marketing, or just pocket the difference to scale faster. The deep local network is completely outmaneuvered by the leverage of the dual network.
And the leverage works in reverse, too. What happens 3 years later when both brands want to expand internationally?
Oh, that's a good point.
Founder A has a panic attack. Exporting is terrifying if you've only ever operated domestically. They have to hire international trade consultants, fly to foreign countries to blind pitch distributors, figure out complex foreign tax codes, and translate their entire marketing strategy. It's an incredibly expensive, high-risk endeavor.
But Founder B, expanding back to their home country isn't international expansion, it's just calling home.
Right.
They already know the major distributors. They inherently understand the cultural marketing nuances. They know exactly what colors or phrases will resonate with the consumers. They know which legal loopholes to avoid. They can essentially launch an international branch of their business over a weekend.
They act as a node connecting two distinct economic ecosystems. A local founder is bound by local constraints. The migrant founder can route around local constraints by pulling levers in an entirely different hemisphere.
It's an incredibly potent combination. You have the dual lens idea generation and the dual network execution. But if we stop there, we're painting a picture that makes this sound easy, like it's just a matter of connecting dots. And our source material provides a very stark warning against that assumption.
Yeah, we can't ignore the toll this takes.
Having the network and the idea is great, but executing it requires an almost uncomfortable level of drive. Executing this requires a level of physical and emotional endurance that is difficult to overstate.
The text is fascinatingly direct here. It notes that discussing the sheer psychological drive of these founders can actually make some people uncomfortable. And as we analyze this, we need to unpack exactly why that discomfort exists.
I flagged that exact sentence in the text. This segment might make some people uncomfortable.
Right.
Why? Because it punctures our sanitized corporate view of motivation.
Absolutely.
We live in an era where entrepreneurship is heavily branded around concepts like finding your passion or optimizing your lifestyle or disrupting a space. It's highly intellectualized. But the source is talking about something far more primal. It's talking about the hunger factor.
It is the stark difference between wanting to succeed and needing to survive. Australian research cited in the source found an incredibly strong statistical correlation between what psychologists call achievement motivation and entrepreneurial capabilities in migrant populations.
Achievement motivation?
Yes. This isn't just a desire to do well. It is a raw, unrelenting drive to proactively hunt down opportunities and force them to yield resources.
And we have to look at the furnace where that drive is forged. The text outlines the realities of where many of these individuals are coming from. They aren't leaving comfortable middle-class lives just for a change of scenery.
No, not at all.
They are escaping systemic political instability, rampant corruption, hyperinflation, or rigid class systems where no matter how brilliant you are, the ceiling of your potential is locked inches above your head.
So when they arrive, their relationship to the concept of failure is fundamentally different from a local founder's relationship to failure. Let's do a risk calculus.
Okay, let's do it.
If you are a native-born citizen who decides to launch a software startup and after 2 years it totally collapses, what is the actual absolute worst-case scenario?
You lose your investors' money, you have to swallow your pride, update your LinkedIn profile to say seeking new opportunities, maybe move into your parents' basement or a friend's spare room for a few months, and use your college network to get a mid-level corporate job.
Right.
It's a massive blow to the ego and maybe a temporary financial setback, but you aren't going to starve. The safety net of your citizenship and your domestic network is there to catch you. The stakes are effectively contained.
Exactly. The floor is relatively high, but consider the migrant founder. They have uprooted their entire existence. Perhaps their extended family pooled their life savings to pay for the migration process.
Right.
Perhaps returning home means returning to a regime that will persecute them, or an economy where their children will have no future. If their business fails, they can't just move into their parents' basement. They might face deportation. They might lose the ability to send life-saving remittances back home.
Failure is existentially catastrophic. It is incredibly, devastatingly expensive.
But the inverse is also true. Success is not just about buying a nicer car. Success is generational transformation.
Wow.
It is the ability to pull their entire family out of poverty, to secure top-tier education for their children, to build a fortress of security. When the gap between failure and success is that incredibly wide, it alters human behavior.
That kind of pressure could easily crush a person. I think it would paralyze most people.
It does crush some. But remember the selection effect we discussed in part 1. The people who made it this far are the ones genetically or psychologically predisposed to thrive under that exact pressure. It creates a laser-like focus. The text clarifies that this doesn't necessarily mean they are working 120-hour weeks while the local founder only works 40. It's not just about raw hours. It's about the quality and the intensity of those hours.
If you literally cannot afford to fail, you do not waste a single hour on vanity metrics. You don't spend a month debating the color palette of your website. You don't lease a fancy co-working space to feel like a CEO.
Right. None of that.
You are ruthlessly focused on revenue generation on day one. You are profoundly proactive because waiting for the market to come to you means starvation.
And this intense, unseen grind brings us to one of the most vital corrections our source material makes to the public narrative. It actively destroys the myth of the overnight success.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because society, the media, the business press, we are addicted to the neat, clean narrative arc.
We love a good headline.
We do. We love the glossy magazine headline. New arrival builds $10 million empire in just 3 years. We focus entirely on the shiny outcome, the ribbon-cutting ceremony. We look at the outcome and think, wow, they just had a brilliant idea and it exploded.
The source labels what happens before that headline as the period of invisible preparation. And it argues that this preparation is the most grueling, cognitively exhausting phase of the entrepreneurial journey. What the media misses is the sheer compounding mental load of those invisible years.
I really want to slow down and paint a picture of this mental load, because if you haven't lived it, it is almost impossible to truly grasp the magnitude of the friction. Let's take a single mundane business task: signing a commercial lease for a small warehouse space. Yeah. If a native founder does this, they get a 40-page PDF from the landlord. It's annoying, but they generally know what indemnity means. They understand the concept of a triple net lease. They know they need to get local zoning approval. They might send it to a lawyer friend to look over. It takes a few hours of cognitive effort.
Now put the migrant founder in that exact same scenario. They receive that 40-page PDF. First, they are not just reading it, they are painstakingly translating it.
Yes.
They are sitting at a kitchen table at 1:00 a.m. after working a 12-hour shift at a survival job, holding a pocket dictionary, or frantically typing paragraphs into translation software.
And it goes deeper than just translating words. They are translating entirely foreign legal philosophies. In their origin country, a commercial lease might be a handshake agreement with the landlord and a flexible cash payment every month.
Right.
The very concept of personal liability, of being legally bound to pay for structural repairs, of credit checks, these might be entirely alien concepts.
Exactly. Every single sentence is a landmine. And while they are burning massive amounts of cognitive energy trying to decode this lease, they are simultaneously trying to navigate a completely foreign tax system. They are trying to figure out how payroll works in a new jurisdiction. They are spending their tiny slivers of free time trying to convince local suppliers to give them inventory on credit, facing constant skepticism and rejection.
They are making painful, expensive mistakes constantly. Not because they aren't smart, but simply because they don't know the unwritten cultural rules of how business is conducted in that specific zip code. Maybe they negotiate too aggressively and offend a supplier. Maybe they price their product wrong because they misunderstood local consumer psychology.
The source captures this perfectly. It states that these so-called overnight successes are actually 10-year journeys compressed into a catchy headline. That 10-year journey is constructed out of thousands of tiny, unglamorous humiliations, profound exhaustions, and terrifying leaps of faith that never make it into the final press release.
Thousands of tiny humiliations. That is the reality, which makes for a perfect pivot to the next major section of our analysis, because this grueling reality forces us to acknowledge that this isn't a fairy tale. The advantages are real, but the friction is immense.
It is.
As much as we have praised the distinct advantages, the 3D cognitive lenses, the international WhatsApp networks, the fierce survival motivation, we absolutely must balance the narrative. Our source is very careful not to portray migration as a magic wand.
Migration guarantees absolutely nothing. The failure rates are still significant. If we are analyzing this objectively, the friction points they face are structural, systemic, and incredibly severe.
We just touched on the mental load of regulatory complexity. But let's look at the financial architecture, the capital issue. We mentioned earlier that they have no credit history. I want to fully explain why that is an absolute death sentence for a typical business and how they survive it anyway. If you want to scale a business, if you need to buy a massive container of inventory or hire 5 employees or launch a marketing campaign, you need cash flow up front. A native founder can walk into a local bank, show 5 years of W-2 tax returns, point to their excellent credit score, maybe put their suburban house up as collateral, and walk out with a $100,000 small business loan at a reasonable interest rate.
The migrator founder walks into that exact same bank with a better business plan and a more profitable unit economic model. They are blocked.
Locked completely.
The bank's risk assessment algorithms literally cannot process them. The algorithm looks for a local financial history. It finds a blank space. It returns a fatal error. They have no local assets to offer as collateral. The bank manager might personally like their idea, but institutional policy forbids the loan. The traditional financial vascular system of the economy is completely closed off to them.
So how do they fund the business?
It forces them to rely on deeply inefficient, high-risk alternatives. They must bootstrap relentlessly, reinvesting every single penny of early revenue back into the business while paying themselves nothing. They deplete whatever personal savings survive the migration process.
Right.
Or they rely on informal lending networks within their diaspora community, essentially borrowing cash from a web of extended family and community members based purely on personal honor and trust, which carries immense social pressure.
The pressure is unimaginable. You are risking not just a bank's money, but the hard-earned survival cash of your immediate community. And then we have to address the friction point that the Australian studies in our text explicitly highlight.
The invisible headwind.
Yes, the invisible headwind of bias and discrimination.
Yeah. The research examines this strictly as an objective variable that directly impacts firm performance and entrepreneurial outcomes. It is a documented friction coefficient. When an entrepreneur is perceived as an outsider, it introduces a layer of resistance into every single transaction.
Let's trace how that friction actually manifests in the daily operation of a business. It's not always dramatic or overtly hostile. It's often a slow bleed of opportunity. It manifests in a venture capitalist unconsciously favoring a native founder who went to the same university as them, simply because the cultural pattern matching feels safer.
It manifests in a commercial landlord mysteriously deciding to lease prime retail space to a recognizable local franchise instead of the migrant's unproven concept, even if the migrant offered a higher deposit. It manifests in local suppliers demanding cash up front instead of offering standard 30-day net payment terms because they perceive the migrant business as an inherently higher flight risk.
And I'm going to be very clear here. We are looking at this precisely how the source material presents it, as a factual, systemic business hurdle that must be navigated. But honestly, when I read this section of the text, my ultimate takeaway wasn't despair. It was profound awe.
How so?
Because the remarkable part of this entire phenomenon isn't that migrant entrepreneurs face these massive reinforced concrete walls. Of course they do. The truly remarkable part is that the combination of traits we've spent the last hour dissecting, the psychological resilience, the cognitive arbitrage of the dual lens, the leverage of the global network, the unrelenting hunger, allows them to scale those concrete walls anyway.
That is the ultimate synthesis of the data. They don't succeed because the path is clear. They succeed despite the path being heavily obstructed.
Exactly.
They innovate around the closed banking system by bootstrapping with extreme capital efficiency. They bypass the biased local supplier by importing superior materials via their dual network. They overcome the lack of institutional trust by delivering a product or service so radically superior sourced through their information advantage that the local market simply cannot ignore them.
They outmaneuver the friction. So if these individuals are overcoming these odds to build businesses, what does this mean for the country that receives them? Let's zoom out. If we had this massive cohort of highly resilient individuals who are successfully overcoming these stacked odds to build companies, what does this actually mean on a macro scale?
It's massive.
What does it mean for the economy as a whole?
The macroeconomic impact is staggering, and it completely subverts the standard political talking points. According to the OECD data referenced throughout our source, developed economies, countries across North America, Europe, and notably Australia, benefit exponentially from this dynamic. And we must understand that this goes far beyond the simplistic narrative of migrants arrive and fill open jobs.
Right. The usual narrative treats them purely as a labor supply. But this research proves they are the engines of the labor demand.
Exactly. When these successful migrant entrepreneurs build their companies, they are fundamentally job creators. They are hiring the native-born population. They are leasing local real estate. They are paying corporate taxes, payroll taxes, property taxes.
They're fueling the whole machine.
Yes. But the economic ecosystem effects go even deeper. They act as the vital bridges we discussed earlier. By pulling foreign capital, novel manufacturing techniques, and new consumer goods into the local economy, they enrich the entire economic soil.
They introduce innovations that disrupt stagnant local monopolies, forcing the local competitors to actually improve their products. And they massively expand the nation's export capacity by leveraging their home country networks to sell local goods abroad.
They do not just participate in the existing economic pie. They literally bake a larger pie for everyone in the jurisdiction. They grow the economy from the inside out, introducing global efficiencies into local markets.
Which brings us finally to the application of all this data. The lessons for you, the person listening to this deep dive right now. Because I want to be very clear. The ultimate takeaway from this rigorous economic research is definitively not you need to sell your house, pack your bags, and move to Finland tomorrow if you want to be a successful entrepreneur.
No. The geographic relocation is just the mechanism that forces the adaptation. The core lesson, as the source explicitly argues, is that the mindset can be adopted. The advantage is cognitive, not geographical.
So how do you do it? How can you artificially introduce this powerful migrant filter into your own daily life? How can you cultivate that resilience, that dual lens perspective, without having to cross an ocean?
This raises an important question for the listener. Are you letting your profound comfort in your local market, your deep understanding of how things have always been done, blind you to the opportunities that a new arrival mindset would spot in 5 minutes?
How can you force yourself to put on those red and blue 3D glasses? Maybe for you, the dual lens isn't two different countries. Maybe it's two entirely different professional disciplines. If you have spent your entire career in corporate finance, your world is totally blue.
Right.
How could you look at your daily financial problems through the red lens of a graphic designer, or a supply chain logistician, or an evolutionary biologist? How can you purposefully inject foreign data into your localized brain to spot the inefficiencies?
And you must rigorously examine your networks. Are you exclusively networking with people who share your exact educational background, your exact geographic history, and your exact socioeconomic status?
That's a trap so many people fall into.
It is. If so, your network might be deep, but it has zero leverage. You are all looking at the same information. You need to actively seek out adjacent, highly diverse networks. The massive entrepreneurial leverage doesn't come from knowing more people who are just like you. It comes from being the single bridge between two distinct networks that previously had no way to communicate.
You have to voluntarily seek out the friction. You have to look where others aren't looking and assume the humble, highly proactive, continuous learning posture of someone who just arrived and has to figure out the rules of the game from scratch. Maintain the hunger of the outsider even if you have lived in the exact same zip code for your entire life.
It is about maintaining intellectual displacement, never allowing yourself to feel entirely settled in your understanding of the market.
What an incredible intellectual journey this has been today. To synthesize everything we've unpacked, the data is undeniable. The profound success of migrant entrepreneurs is not magic. It is the result of the intense crucible of migration fostering unparalleled psychological resilience. It is the power of a dual-lens perspective, spotting cognitive arbitrage opportunities invisible to locals. It is the mechanical leverage of international dual networks, fueled by a fierce existential motivation born of high stakes.
And before we close, I think it is vital we echo a brief, powerful message that our source material provided at the very end, a specific reflection for any migrants who might be listening to this analysis right now.
Yes, please.
If you are currently navigating this brutal, exhausting journey of invisible preparation, remember that your background, your accent, your lack of deep local ties, your entirely different cultural operating system, these are not inherently disadvantages. They are quite literally the raw materials of your greatest asset. The fact that you understand a world that the locals do not and can see opportunities they're blind to is your distinct, unassailable competitive advantage.
Your difference is your ultimate asset.
Picky.
I absolutely love that framing. Now, before we officially sign off, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to mull over on your own. We have spent this entire hour analyzing how connecting two distinct physical worlds, the origin country and the adopted country, creates massive economic value. But let's look at the horizon.
Right, the future.
We were hurtling toward a hyper-digital, highly globalized future. Cultures, consumer habits, algorithms, and markets are increasingly blending into one massive, homogeneous online reality.
The physical borders of information are dissolving rapidly.
Exactly. So the ultimate question is, as the internet completely homogenizes global culture, will this specific geographic information advantage eventually disappear? Will the cognitive gap between what someone in Sydney knows and what someone in Mumbai knows eventually shrink to zero? And if that geographic arbitrage fades away, where will the successful entrepreneurs of tomorrow have to look to find entirely new types of worlds to connect? Will the next great dual lens require bridging virtual ecosystems or radically new cross-disciplinary sciences?
It is a fascinating puzzle. The pioneers of the next century will have to discover new frontiers to cross.
They absolutely will. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it fundamentally changed the way you look at the economy and maybe helped you find a few new lenses of your own. Remember, the next time you walk out of your front door and look down your street, try to imagine it's your very first day on Earth. You might be shocked at the opportunities you've been walking blindly past.
Show